So we say bye-bye to another draft class, but before we completely put this sucker in the rearview mirror, we got to hand out some draft grades. I already did the NFC earlier today, so you can go check that video after this one because we're talking about the AFC. A special thanks to our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Thank you for sponsoring today's video. Remember, promo code Broshmo when you sign up, but we're going to be starting with AFC North. We're going to start with the Baltimore Ravens, who, golly, if they only had 2 picks in this draft and it was Malachi Starks and Mike Green, then awesome. It's all A+++++. They did a phenomenal job where they just waited in the first 2 rounds and let value hit them in the face. They got the best safety in the class in Malachi Starks. I had a top 20 grade on him. And then they waited patiently and ended up taking Mike Green, edge out of Marshall, who fell for obvious reasons with the character red flags. I had him as a top 10 player. He was 8 on my board. You get him at 59. Home run draft thus far by the Baltimore Ravens. And then they grab Emory Jones, which I'm like, fine. He maybe ends up as a future tackle for this team. I think maybe you can work him in as a guard and he could compete at that left guard spot that Patrick McCarry, he's now gone. So I saw a vision. I kind of like him better at guard too, but this was a little higher than where I had him on my board. And the Ravens then just proceeded, like they grabbed some players that I liked, but higher than where I would have taken them. Like Teddy Buchanan, linebacker at Cal, very much a sub-package coverage linebacker. They took him at 129. I had him just outside of my top 200. Carson Vincent, tackle out of Alabama A&M, very much a project developmental tackle, which that's fine. That's kind of what he's stepping into, but he's got good length, good movement skills. I had him at 221 on my big board because, again, he's a project. He ends up going at 141. So, again, those are much higher than where I had it. They end up going with Bilal Cone, corner out of Western Michigan, in the 6th. I'm cool with that. I had a draftable grade on him. I thought he had a good Senior Bowl. They grabbed a kicker, Tyler Loop, out of Arizona at 186. We know what's going on with Justin Tucker. I don't mind them drafting a kicker as long as you're doing it with a late day 3 pick. If you really think you need to draft a kicker or a punter, do it in the 6th or 7th round. They did that. LeJohntay Wester, wide receiver out of Colorado. He's smaller, probably more of a slot only, but it brings some definite elusiveness and shiftiness to the wide receiver core. Aeneas Peoples ends up being I think a good pickup as a DPR pass rush only type of player on the interior. You bring him in and just say, pin your ears back and go after it. I think that's a good pickup. This was about the range I had him in, though, because I don't see him as an early down player in the NFL. Then they grabbed Roger Longerbeam, who I think could work either outside, but doesn't have the most ideal frame, but he plays with that stank. He plays with some nastiness, but probably more ideally is going to be a slot. Garrett Dellinger, it's pick 243. I thought I had an undraftable grade on him. He didn't do much to really impress me, but it's back into the 7th round. You get to reunite him with Emory Jones. I think I'm okay with it. I don't mind too much. All in all, they grabbed players I liked, even if it was a little bit earlier than I would take them, but that was all in the 4th, 5th, and 6th round. Grabbing Emory Jones, I'm kind of okay with. Mike Green was a steal. Malachi Starks, you just sat back and did nothing, and Starks fell to you. That's kind of ridiculous. I'm going to give them an A. Even if they reached on some players on day 3, I don't hate it. There were players that I liked. So good on the Ravens, man. They continue to draft really, really well. Let's move on to the Cincinnati Bengals, which I'm going to be real. I don't know how Bengals fans feel about it. Not one of my favorite drafts. They grabbed Shamar Stewart, edge out of Texas A&M. I get it. He's got a lot of tools. You're hoping you could turn that into production. I don't mind them taking a shot on him at 17. We saw edges starting to fly off the board. Mikael Williams. You saw Jalen Walker go think was it the pick before? No. It was, so Atlanta took Jalen Walker. Walter Nolan then came off the board. So you started to see defensive line in general start to come off the board. So you kind of had to make your move. So I don't mind it. And it's a premium position. And then we get to the rest of the draft, and they decided not to draft premium position for the remainder of the draft. And by premium, I'm talking positions like quarterback, obviously the most valuable, but not needed for the Bengals. Wide receiver, offensive tackle. Granted, they need more guard help, which they addressed. And then like edge, pass rush in general, corner. They didn't really do that. They went with Demetrius Knight, Jr., linebacker out of South Carolina. This was a little earlier than where I had him on my board, but he is a literal plug and play now. If they want to move or just release Jermaine Pratt, they can now do that. I was okay with that. Dylan Fairchild, this was a little bit higher than where I had him, but I get it. You want to get some protection at guard right now. Your guard position is PP poo-poo. So it was what it was. It was like, you know what? Fine. That's fine. Why are we drafting a second linebacker, Barrett Carter, out of Clemson? This was like, and again, the Bengals, this was the right spot for him. I had him at 128 on my board. He goes at 119. You drafted a linebacker already. Why? Why are we doing that? They end up going with Jalen Rivers, offensive tackle, probably more of a guard, out of Miami at 153. That was about the range. I think I had him at 177. But I mean, you already drafted a guard earlier. Can we take a shot on maybe corner, maybe some more edge? I don't know. Why not? And then they grabbed Taj Brooks, running back out of Texas Tech, who's a bit of a bowling ball, hits with some thud, but he's got some shiftiness to his game. I had him at 159. He goes at 193. So good value. Then I'm outside of edge. They didn't, which was round one. They didn't pick premium positions. We doubled up on linebacker and guard. Okay, I don't really see the vision here. I don't really see the vision. I didn't like this draft. I really didn't. This actually might have been, I think, the worst draft class in the NFL. And I remember during the draft, I was like, man, it's really hard to think about a team that did a poor job in this draft. But if I had to name one, Bengals easily come to mind. And after I digest everything, I put it into my beautiful spreadsheet, I cracked down the numbers. I was like, yeah, Bengals easily had the worst draft class in 2025. As it stands now, again, a lot can change. Again, this is just some dude on the internet's opinion. And maybe we'll be looking back at this in hindsight and we'll be like, what a banger draft. But I'm going with the C-. I didn't like the draft. I just didn't. Sorry, Bengals fans. Love the Bengals, though. Kitty go meow. Kitty go meow. We got the Cleveland Browns. They definitely had the most controversial draft class. I thought they hit it out of the park to start it out. If you weren't going to draft Travis Hunter, fine. If you move out, you better get some good compensation. They did. They obviously got pick 5 in a pick swap for pick 2. They grabbed a second rounder, which was pick 36. Nice. And then they get a first next year. So now you are, if things are shaky this year at quarterback, you're in good position to just go ahead and say, yeah, no, we'll go and draft a quarterback next year because we can now maneuver. We can move up with two first round draft picks. So I really, really liked that. They take Mason Graham. He was a top 5 player on my board. I'm okay with it. To me, A++. We're feeling good. And then to start the second round, they go Carson Schwessinger, linebacker out of UCLA. Granted, okay, first linebacker came off the board. Forget Jalen Walker or whatever you classify him as. Jahad Campbell, he goes at 31. And you're thinking, maybe it'll be pretty soon the next linebacker comes off the board and we think there's a gap. There's a tier between Schwessinger and the rest of the linebackers in this class. So they grab him with the first pick in the second round. And it's like, okay, fine. I get it. You got stuff going on with JOK in the neck, unfortunately. They did end up grabbing a running back. I thought they might go running back at 33. So really you could switch these around and be okay with it. They grab Quinshon Judkins. They go for the Thunder. I thought they might go for the Lightning. I think I projected them to go with Travion Henderson, but they go with the Thunder and Quinshon Judkins. He was one of the top 4 backs in this class, in my opinion. I like the pickup. Then we get to pick 67. They go Harold Fannin Jr., tight end out of Bowling Green. You could do a lot of fun stuff with him. He could be a big slot, tight end 2, move him around, H-back. You're definitely going to have to be creative and scheme him up on stuff because, yeah, you could maybe play him in line, but he's a competitive blocker, but not necessarily the best blocker. They got him at 67. I had him at 68 on my big board, so good value. I'm okay with it. I was waiting for Shedeur to be one of these picks, but no, they end up going Dylan Gabriel at pick 94, which it's like, okay, he's firmly probably a backup, but he can be a high-end backup. Maybe he can be a starter. I just don't see him being a top half of the league starter if he ever got the chance. But he does give you some stability at the quarterback position when it comes to backup. So, okay. And they chose to pass on Shedeur for Gabriel. So seemingly they are out on Shedeur. Okay, fine. So in my head, they're locked in on quarterback next year. That's what I'm thinking they're about to do. They go with Dylan Sampson in the 4th round. I like it. I don't mind it. You already had the Thunder with Quinshon Judkins. Now you bring in the Lightning with Dylan Sampson out of Tennessee. Straight up. Sorry if you are a dynasty owner of Jerome Ford. Sorry. And then with the final pick, they actually moved up. They traded away a 5th and a 6th to move up 20 spots, 22 spots specifically, and grabbed Shedeur Sanders, quarterback out of Colorado. They ended the slide, and my question is, why not just take him at pick 94? Which you'd be like, well, he made it to the 5th round. That's why. But it's like, you now look at it. It's like, okay, you can't keep both of these guys. One of these guys are going to hit the practice squad. You got Flacco there as the backup for Kenny Pickett. You're going to keep one around as an emergency QB. Because during my stream, I forgot Flacco was even on the team. And if you put one on the practice squad, then ta-ta, goodbye. Maybe that guy's gone. So, I mean, I guess there is a quarterback competition now, maybe a backup quarterback competition in Cleveland. And since it's such a minimal investment, because think about this, back into the 3rd round, 5th round draft picks at quarterback. There's no investment there. If you want to go get a quarterback next year, you still can. Just feels things could be a little bit harder with the things that surround Shedeur Sanders. Not necessarily him, but his family. And what can this do from a perception standpoint? I don't know. It's going to make for fun TV. As it'll make for fun TV. They drafted a lot of players I liked, even if it was a little early for Schwessiner. I wish outside of quarterback, I wish they went after more positions of value. Like corner would have been nice. You have 2 corners that are free agents after this year, but it kind of is what it is. At the end of the day, this is a good draft, even if there is a little bit of quarterback controversy for quarterback 3 on the team. It's a good draft class. I'm going to give it a B plus. I could rock with this. Let's move on to the Pittsburgh Steelers, the final team here in the AFC North. As with their first pick, they take Derek Harmon. By the way, hey, much love out to Derek Harmon. If you're unfamiliar with the draft story, he gets drafted and he has to rush off the phone because his mother actually would go into a coma, be put on life support shortly after. and then would pass away later on. So wild sequence of events. And as a father myself, you just want to see your children succeed and be rewarded for their hard work. And his mom got to see that. That's awesome. And you could take some solace in that. So prayers out to Derek Harmon and his family. I'm just glad his mom got to see her baby boy be a first rounder. And he's going to Pittsburgh. He's a good fit. This is your heir apparent for Cameron Hayward. I like the pick. They didn't force quarterback. Aaron Rodgers is probably coming to town. I'm okay with it. They didn't have a second round pick. I am taking into account trades. And that second rounder was used to get DK Metcalf. That's kind of good. So again, we're taking into account some of these trades. And then they grabbed Caleb Johnson, running back out of Iowa, in the third round. He's a perfect fit for Arthur Smith and that outside zone blocking scheme. He ran a lot of zone blocking at Iowa. And he's here at 83. He was, 75 on my board? 79 on my board. So the value is right on the money. I like the pick. Jack Sawyer in the fourth at 123. I still had Sawyer pretty high relatively. I had him at 95 on my big board. They get a player who's going to be a good rotation player. Very productive at Ohio State. He might not have ideal length. He might not be an elite athlete, but he brings an elite motor and elite production. So I'm okay with it. This is a Pittsburgh Steeler type of player. And then in the fifth, they go with Waya Black. They list him as a corner. Kind of strange. Defensive tackle, nose tackle out of Iowa. Can you imagine a corner being 6'6", 336 pounds? I can't. So he's going to fill in and be like the nose tackle. He's going to be in that rotation there. Again, there's not a lot of guys built that way in the draft that can act as zero techs or play at 0-1 techs. So if you're going to want to get one of those guys, you probably have to go early on day 3. And they did. They grabbed him. Will Howard makes it to the 6th round. Basically no pressure. Developmental quarterback. Can he be the future? Doesn't really matter. Bring Aaron Rodgers in if things are okay. Maybe this allows you to still draft a quarterback next year. It's just very minimal risk, potentially good reward. They grab Carson Bruner, butchered the last name, apologies. Linebacker out of Washington. His father is actually, I believe, isn't he a scout for the Steelers? But he also was drafted in the first round by the Steelers. He played tight end though. His father. This is a cat that can play. He was Washington's special teams MVP back in 2023. Became a full-time starter for the first time in 2024. However, he was like the 3rd or 4th leading tackler the years prior. So he was very involved in the rotation. A guy that has a nose for the football. I kind of liked it here. And then Dante Kent, didn't get to him out of Central Michigan. He's been on my watch list for 2 years now. He was on it for the 2024 class. Didn't get around to him in the summer. Didn't get around to it during the year or after the season, but it's pick 229 for a player I've heard a lot of good things about. Looks like a good pick to me. So all in all, I thought they had a fairly good draft. A lot of this hinges on Aaron Rodgers. Are they going to sign, or is this Mason Rudolph's team? But it was a good draft. It was a good draft. There wasn't much that I disagreed with. A lot of fine players were selected. I'm going to give it a B+. Again, nothing really blew me out of the water, but it didn't have to. You could just go out there and draft good players and call it a day. And I think they did that. They draft good players. So call it a day.